Thank you, Jay, and thank you to Mr Davis and Mr Walker for joining us. You've both mentioned this morning about the balance that your respective sporting bodies have to strike when it comes to negotiations on broadcast rights. And Mr Walker, you mentioned there about the balance you're striking about ensuring eyeballs on the product, as it were, and also securing a source of income to the sport as well. Can I ask, just in very general terms, is it becoming more difficult to strike that balance? Are pressures mounting in such a way that there is greater, perhaps, a need to maximise the investment, and that then inevitably makes it more difficult to ensure more eyeballs on the sport, as it were?
Well, it may well become increasingly more difficult. And what we rely on are the free-to-air broadcasters to continue to be competitive. It doesn't mean necessarily to outbid their opponents, but to be competitive. And as long as they continue to be competitive, my personal view is that the Welsh Rugby Union, Welsh Rugby, will continue to look very closely at those bids, and it won't just be about the top level. Now, every organisation, just like they say, every person has their price. Every organisation will have their price. And some organisations, some national governing bodies, that price has been reached. It would be a significantly greater price than I've seen so far for the reasons that I've stated. Because if you're going to grow the game, if you want a young girl or young boy picking up a ball in Fishguard or in Bala or somewhere else, the way that you do that, the way that most get engaged, first of all, is seeing the product on television. There are other ways, of course, but when you have those big must-see events where 60, 70% of the population of Wales is tuned in for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is, you've got to continue to bring those events to those large audiences.
I think that's very useful. And just to clarify that, when we talk about a competitive bid, am I right to understand that what we're talking here about is audiences and audience share, being able to maintain high levels of audience share when it comes to these fixtures? That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Davis?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think Nigel, kind of summarises quite well. I think what we need to do going forward is make sure we engage with a new audience. So the Gen Zs of the world are really important. That's why digital is really key to what we do. So what we're looking at probably from broadcast partners now is how they kind of use innovation to try and engage with this audience more, if you know what I mean, because that's what we need to be able to do. So yeah, traditional linear is really key, but it's also making sure that we embrace new technology, that viewers, now everybody's got Wi-Fi, you can watch it anywhere. We need to make sure that we look at broadcast partners that can evolve and innovate with us to make that experience better.
Thank you. That's very interesting, and something that has been discussed in previous sessions of the committee, about how the way in which people of different ages consuming content, watching regular TV, sporting events, what have you, is changing quite rapidly. Is it something that you're having discussions with more traditional public service broadcasters about the wider offer and package of services they can offer? And I have in mind things like podcasts, radio sort of shows, after discussing the games and what have you, those sorts of content. Is that something that is featuring a part of your discussions?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Nigel's probably the same. The relationship is really key with our broadcasters and any deal we have. So we sell our rights on a platform neutral basis, so they can put those rights anywhere they want. So the wraparound bits that we call, so the highlights, the best goals, the interviews, are really key in terms of what we're trying to do. So I think when you look at broadcast deals, it's not just what's seen on TV, it's what goes around it to help build that brand and get more people involved with it. So yeah, innovation is really key in terms of how we interact with our audience.
And Mr Walker, just a similar question, but is it something that to come back on when future bids perhaps from public service broadcasters with offers on alternative platforms, YouTube, what have you, content that might engage with younger generations in a particularly different way, are those the types of things that you're keen to see come forward as part of bids in the future? Absolutely,
completely agree. And it's dreadful that Ian and I are violently agreeing on everything here, but it is so important. Yeah. And it's not looking through my lens of a person who's very nearly 60. It's looking through the lens of all age groups, and the BBC, ITV, S4C are all thinking this way too. And I've had some experiences over the last 2 years. As many of you will know, I was involved in the professionalisation of women's rugby in Wales. And our young female players, the way they engage, some things that they've done on TikTok, the way that they've engaged with their audiences in a way that I would never have thought of, which is really important. And just like the FAW have done some fantastic work in that area in recent times, we're talking to ITV, we're talking to BBC about what the Rugby World Cup will look like. Not just the matches, which are obviously very, very important, but the wraparound elements, which Ian referred to. What can we do to continue to engage our audiences, continue to bring value to our audience, our supporters? I'm a broadcaster all of a sudden. Our supporters. What can we do to make sure that there's a long tail to these big events?
Thank you very much, both. Sorry.
Yeah, so just to add also, we've found that we've actually now developed our own streaming platform. It's called Red Wall Plus. So we've recognised that there might be a gap in some of our deals and the way that we kind of use broadcasters. So we've actually got our own online platform. We only launched it about a month ago, but we've put stuff on there which is more relevant to a different audience. So what you'll probably find is that the rights holders and governing bodies will become more media agencies as such. So we're getting our own product really and saying this is what can fit and this is why it's good. So yeah.